Good morning, everyone. I'm from NIIT, and what I'm going to try and talk about this morning is our experiences in creating games, but games that are teaching people something relevant. And we've been fortunate to work with a whole host of companies, some in this room and many outside, and we've learned a lot. And what I've tried to put together in this presentation is how do you go about creating engaging learning content using games as a base concept. You'll hear me talk about a formula on the screen. I'm not reinventing what Einstein said, but we believe that E certainly equals MC5, and I'll expand that in a couple of minutes. Let's talk a little bit about what happens at home. When a kid comes home and says homework is really difficult, that's not good, right? Because he's going to stop learning. But when a kid comes home and says that game was so easy, he's not going to play it anymore. Do you see a funny situation there? We love games that are challenging, but we hate homework that is. So let's try and see how we can solve the problem. I'm going to show you a small clip, and before that I caveat. A few minutes ago I discovered that I had been thrown into a bit of a challenge. The audio on my laptop does not talk with the audio equipment here. I have a couple of small snips of video, so I think we'll manage without the sound, but wherever you see video moving and not hearing anything, just imagine what's going on there, right? Should be fairly easy. So I'm going to show you, start off with a small clip we created for an oil company. The background is, this is to teach operators how to perform what's called a jack-up operation on an oil rig. A jack-up operation, which results in a hang-up sometimes, is when one of the four legs of an oil rig is not deeply embedded into the ocean floor, and there's a risk of the rig floating away. So the way and this is the opening dramatic scene before the actual learning course starts. For obvious reasons, I can't show you the course itself, but I'm just showing you the prologue before the course began. So you've been called as an operator to go and figure out what's happening on the rig. And let me just play it for you. It's very, very brief. And here's where there is some dramatic music at the back. So just imagine that. So that's you coming on a chopper. You're going to land on the chopper. The weight of the chopper, by the way, is also going to add to the tilt of the rig. And you're now walking around the rig, exploring what's going on. And then here you see the impact of what could happen if you don't fix the problem. Now, what's the purpose of this? The purpose of this is you're showing a consequence up front if you don't perform the job correctly. How many of our programs are designed that way? How many of our programs tell people, if you don't do this properly, you will create a mistake, and a mistake would be expensive? Programs are not designed to prevent mistakes. I just wish they were. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. This is an old joke. A famous actress, it's attributed to two women, so I'm not sure which one actually said it. A famous actress once told George Bernard Shaw that we should get married. With my looks and your brains, think of the children we'll have. To which George Bernard Shaw responded, but what if they have my looks and your brains, right? So I didn't say this is an old joke. But why am I saying this? Computer games and computer games for education both have been around forever, right? But computer games for education really haven't made any impact, have they? How many computer education games do you ever remember you seeing, or those if you have kids seeing? Very few. Most of them are junk, right? Because they land up picking the bad attributes of education and entertainment and create something that's so contrived, that's so unnatural, that it's terrible. And I'll show you some examples. So here's a snapshot of a great game. And by the way, when I say games here, I love Candy Crush, I love Subway Surfer, but I'm talking about games that take you 30 minutes to download on a 3G network. I'm talking about the Halo 3s and the Warcrafts, and if you see Big Bang Theory, the sort of games Sheldon and the crew play. So I'm talking real involved games here. Just stay with me on that. I love the other games as well. So in a game, what's happening? It's a great scenario. You're the hero. There are different characters in front of you. There are many things you could do. Whole bunch of dials and meters on the left. So many things to do at the same time. It engages so many of your senses, right? It's fascinatingly involving. And how does education work, right? those of you who were around in the 80s, I don't know if you remember this movie called Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? If you haven't seen it, it's a brilliant cult film of that era. This is an actor called Ben Steen, and it's a great piece of audio. You could see it on YouTube anytime. But this is him in the classroom teaching a bunch of kids. Even though the audio doesn't work, you'll kind of get a sense of what's going on. The piece on YouTube, by the way, is called Anyone, because he's asking questions and he's asking the kids, anyone? So I'll just let it play for a bit. Oops. Again, it's not too long. So he's explaining some economic theory. So those are the kids with the fascinated expressions. That's Ferris Bueller, by the way. So right, so we've all at some point sat through some of these classes. So on one hand, you have this very, very engaging, challenging environment of a game that people love to learn more so that they can achieve something. And then on the other hand, you have this extremely boring classroom, right? I don't know how many of you have heard of this term called Shaoyin reversal. This is what I was talking about earlier, where you pick where an offspring inherits the bad attributes of both parents, right, and lands up as a complete disaster and leaves behind the good attributes of parents. That's what the Shaoyin reversal is, and this is what's been happening to our games. Some more examples. This character, I'm sure most of us know, right? If you don't, perhaps that's also fortunate in a way. Spaghetti westerns are also critiqued by many people. But anyway, I'm going to give examples of ugly games, bad games, and then good games. So the Lee Van Cleef version, or the ugly games, here's some examples. What are these? So these are actually, quiz questions which are hiding like games. For example, you take a popular game like Trivial Pursuit or Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy and so on, and then you ask a bunch of quiz questions, right, and pretend as though it's a great game, right? Some of us have done this, and many of us have been subjected to this. So if I designed a game like that, this is what it would look like. A real bad crossword impersonating to be a gaming education program, right? I love crosswords. I love the crossword in the Hindu, I love the crossword in the New York Times, and I can do it. But I can't make a good crossword. It'll look like this. And this teaches me nothing. Right? So this is the real ugly version of games. Then there is the Eli Wallach, or the bad version of games. It's slightly better than the ugly version of education games. This one is, uses a nice gaming concept. For example, you are a space prospector, right? So you've landed on this strange planet. And of course, planets are very fashionable these days. So you land on a planet, right? Now, this could be a great game for geology, right? Land on a new planet, dig up the soil, discover a new element, and so on. But that's not what happens here. What happens is, straight from a textbook, here pops a question, right? A rock found by volcano action is known as, yeah, right. So now you have the score of 157. Whatever that means, you pick an answer, sedimentary, which is wrong, and then voila, a space pirate steals away some gold, and then your points reduce. Really? We've seen this as well, right? I mean, you just taken a game, and this is like the Shaoyin reversal classic case. So those are bad. The good stuff, the Clint Eastwood, the heroic stuff, right, is where the game is natural to the learning process. It's not added on. It's not a bolt-on. So for example, flight simulators are fantastic examples of making it as real as possible without the actual exposure. I was fortunate enough to actually sit in one of these with one of my clients, and it is amazing. Absolutely, you can't get more real than that. And I'm glad that our pilots who fly us sit through these. But any simulation tends to be much better to represent education and learning and gamification. So now, what's the formula all about? So E stands for education, right? So education is equal to MC5. And we believe that there are 6 principles which, if applied appropriately, will give you a fantastic learning experience in a gaming environment. And I'll explain each of these in a minute. There's a mission, there's a context, there's a challenge, there's a choice, there's a consequence, and there's a compulsion. So that's the MC5. And you will get chances to see this again and again in the next couple of minutes. So this is a piece I would have loved to have the audio on, but let me explain. It's a short clip of a course that we made in NIIT 2 years back. to represent some of these E equals MC5 principles. I'll give you the context before I play it for you. The learner, which is you, are placed in an environment where you have 1 week to negotiate with the house owner. That's the lady there on the screen. She owns a house. You have a week to buy the house from her. So that's your deadline. So you're going to learn negotiation, which is based, by the way, on this book that the late Robert Fisher wrote. It's called Getting to Yes. He used to head the Harvard negotiation project, by the way. So he wrote this book, and there was this video made, I think about 12 years ago, which is about the book, Robert Fisher speaking about the book. So we took that course, and what we did was we started creating scenarios. So this is a game sort of a situation. I'll pause it a couple of times in the middle just to explain what's going on. I would have done that even if the audio was working, by the way. But like I said, this is the house owner. You're negotiating to buy the house. Let's see what happens. I'll explain what she just said. So she said, so what do you think about the offer I made you? Now these are 5 choices you have to make based on what she said. If you can read, look at the choices carefully. Each choice is extremely real. It's not that, what's the color of the sky? Blue, green, red, yellow. It's not as simple as that. The choices are real. They are based on mistakes people actually make in negotiation. Of course, if you had read the book and gone through the course, the chances are you may get it right, you may not. That's the first thing to note. The second thing to note, the lady is in front of you. You will keep, and I've just taken a 10-second from what is otherwise a 170-minute course. You will see the house owner is in the screen throughout the 170 minutes. It's real. You will see her body language. You will see her frowning. You will see her making faces. That's what happens. When you're negotiating with your supplier or customer, you can't go to the corner and read Roger's book and come back. Right? It's happening in front of you. It's real. Now you pick a choice, and then you're going to pick the wrong choice, and let's see what happens. So the minus 30 represents that you did wrong. So it keeps giving you pluses and minuses. You know, a minus 30 means like, oh, oops, and a plus means I'm kind of progressing. So now she says, too bad. So you just blew the deal, by the way. So now, at this point, because you really messed up, at some point, the mentor, not the mentor, sorry, the facilitator of this course now walks to you and says, hey buddy, I think you need to go back and do a few things, right? You're really messing up. And then he asks you to refer to some of the coach's instructions, and that's here. And then this is the original extract from a 1-hour video that Roger Fisher spoke. Traditionally, how would we have done this? You would have had somebody coming and showing a few PowerPoint slides about negotiation. Then you'll be subjected to a 1-hour video watching session. Then you'll have a few role plays, and then you'll do an assessment and you'll go home. And I know we still do this in some of our corporates even today, including mine, right? But here's a very different way of doing it. What we did was we took scenarios of those negotiation and we clipped that one long video into 2 or 3 minute capsules. Also nowadays very interestingly called performance support videos, industry buzzword for you, right? And link them back to the actual scenario so that when you screw up on a particular negotiation strategy, you know exactly where to go back and look at. So this is the whole mosaic of the various options. Now I'll explain the M and the 5 C's very quickly. So every good game lays out a mission. If those of you have played some of these games, you know that it starts off very dramatic. It's like a Hollywood movie. Things going in the sky and flares and this lot of drama. Why do they do that? They do that because you need to set up a motivation for a learner to achieve something, right? So games are all about what? You try something, you fail, but you come back and try again because you want to get to that mission. It could be to save the planet, it could be to become the richest man in the world, it could be to save a princess or whatever, but there is a clear mission that games set up for you. Context. Games are always in an environment where you can see things, you can do things, try it, fail, pass, it's all right. So games are always set in a context. Challenge. Games always get you to do something that you are not ready for, right? That's the whole purpose. Remember the school kid who comes in and says, this game is too easy, it's boring, he stopped playing. But a game that balances enough between how much you're capable of and how much you're not yet, those are the games that really stick. Which is why people in Candy Crush have reached what, I don't know, 70,000 or whatever levels they seem to be. You go on and on, right? Because it's challenging. It gives you enough to crack that next level, but not in the first attempt. If you could crack the game in the first attempt, you would stop playing, right? So they always challenge you. Consequences. Every good game has consequences for doing something wrong. In this picture of a war zone, there are different ways to cross the bridge and reach the enemy land. You could take the bridges, you could take the boat, you could go down the canyon and come up, or whatever else. But most likely, you will make a mess the first time you try it, or even the second. But the third time, you probably could get it, right? So there are always choices people make. I mean, you're given choices to make as the learner, as the player. There are consequences, dramatic consequences. Cities blow up, you die. All sorts of things happen in games, right? Again, because people need to understand that doing something wrong will mean that there will be consequences. This is how fraud is done, by the way. Now, what if you had a game that starts off in a scenario where a company has gone bust, Chapter 11, and then you are called in as an accountant to investigate what led to that situation. It may not be Halo 3, but I think it will be fun, right? Funner than perhaps what it is today, right? So here's the reverse problem. The reverse problem is, while gamers get you to fail, right, and that's how you learn, learning designers shield you from failure. They don't want you to fail. Learning programs are designed to be successful. To hold back knowledge is taboo in learning. But seriously, why would you want to give the guy everything which you think he ought to know when he's not going to use most of it in the next 90 days of his job, right? Now, for a minute, let's say on Monday morning you go back and say, all right, we heard from NIIT about E equals MC5, and you're sitting with your corporate HR or your L&D head and say, I'm going to design a course where in the first 1 hour everybody will fail. What do you think will happen? Right? Either you will get laughed out or you'll probably lose your job. If you lose your job, you can get in touch with us, by the way. But having said that, that's the big challenge, right? Learning is designed to protect people from failure, right? But that's what we have to break. And therefore, we really believe that a pedagogy like E equals MC5, with the mission and these 5 C's, some people like to add coaching as the 6th C. You could add that, right? Keep that in mind. Gaming developers know that learning is hard, and gaming needs drama. Always ask yourself, what would a good game developer do? Thank you.